Hello everyone, it's All Seeing Nap again, and I have a different type of video today for you guys. Instead of the typical Red Dead videos I usually post on this channel, today I'll be talking about the Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas, and Grand Theft Auto 5 games. It's no secret to anyone who regularly watches my videos that I have a strong affinity towards Rockstar games because of their immense prowess in storytelling, and with Grand Theft Auto 6 on the way, I figured there would be no better opportunity now than to talk about some Grand Theft Auto. So the topic of today's video is, what happened with the Grove Street families and Ballas between the years 1992 and 2013? First off, I want to add that I am aware of the specific discrepancies between both of these games because canonically the 3D universe and the HD universe are not connected. They are only loosely affiliated in the form of legends, stories, Easter eggs, and references. However, I find that adding our own theories and conclusions to such a significant gap between them is a fun way of helping us understand the story better and why things are the way that they are when we see them in the events of Grand Theft Auto 5. So I will put a disclaimer now that I'm simply theorizing and putting my own personal beliefs out there and should be taken with a grain of salt. To begin, we have to understand that the reason the San Andreas and Grand Theft Auto 5 families are repping different sets is because from 1992 to 2013, new sets were made and old sets were probably taken out of commission. What is some of the evidence for this? Well, for example, in the events of Grand Theft Auto 5, we can see that Grove Street was taken over by the Ballas gang. This would insinuate that between 1992 and 2013, the Grove Street families fell apart and dissolved. Sweet is around 25 years old during the events of San Andreas. Some reports say he's in his 40s or 50s, but he's only 2 years older than CJ, who was 23 in 1992, having been born in 1968. By 2013, Sweet would have been around 46 years old. It's possible that he either quit gangbanging, which would be unlikely given his persistence to stay in the gang and keep his ear to the streets, either died via gang violence or got locked up again in federal prison between the ages of 25 and 46. As for CJ, he probably quit street life altogether after Sweet's incarceration/death and went on to legitimize himself like he always wanted to at the age of 44. In Grand Theft Auto 5, we know that Franklin and Lamar are senior members of the family's gang, having been recognized by the Davis, Forum Drive, and Carson Avenue family sets. They created their own, known as the Chamberlain Gangster families. So those are two examples of a set being destroyed and a new set being made. This can explain why the sets we know in San Andreas, such as Grove Street, Temple Drive, and Seville Boulevard, families either no longer exist or renamed under new management within those 21 years. For anyone who has played San Andreas, you would know that territories are constantly disputed. You can take and defend territories in San Andreas, even taking up at least 36% of rival gang territory in the actual story. So it's no surprise to me that Grove Street was eventually taken over by the Ballas. In the San Andreas story, we're told by Tenpenny that the Ballas were acting a lot smarter than the families. They were making smart alliances with different people and even getting their hands on more guns than the families were. More times than not, you were outnumbered every time you either invaded or attacked the Ballas at any given time. In the mission House Party, we see that the Ballas attempt to invade Grove Street. CJ says it was the heaviest the Ballas had moved in a while. This was the result of the power dynamic between the Ballas and the families shifting in favor of the Ballas. This isn't the last time it happens in San Andreas either. In the mission Homecoming, we can find several Grove Street families high and addicted to crack. When you're tasked with killing the drug dealers, you can find Ballas gang members casually strolling around Grove Street. Throughout the game, the Grove Street families had struggled to preserve their integrity, as this was a constant issue even in the beginning of the game for the mission Cleaning the Hood. So after the inevitable conclusion of Sweet and CJ, there was no one to keep Grove Street in check anymore, and the Ballas weakened Grove Street families from the inside out and took them out with overwhelming numbers. If Sweet is 46 in 2013, that means Stretch, who is 31, first joined the families in the year 2000. We can assume that between 2000 and 2013, the families got involved with drug dealing, which is something Sweet or CJ never would have allowed. So, we can assume that whatever happened to CJ or Sweet happened within at least 8 years after the events of San Andreas, given that Stretch, a family's OG, set up a drug deal between Lamar and Franklin with a drug dealer on Grove Street. What about the Vagos and Aztecas? As I mentioned before, in the 21-year difference, all gangs underwent leadership changes. This is not an exception for the Vagos or Aztecas. And for those who don't know, the Grove Street families and the Aztecas were once allies. CJ was best friends with his sister's boyfriend, Caesar. Caesar was leader of the Barrios Los Aztecas, and the two officially cemented their alliance when Grove Street families helped Caesar and the Aztecas take back their former territories from the Vagos. However, the families and Aztecas are not allies in Grand Theft Auto V for a multitude of reasons. 1. Caesar was 37 in 1992, which makes him 58 in 2013. For the sake of convenience, we will assume the same thing happened to Caesar when we concluded to what happened to Sweet. The Aztecas no longer owed the Grove Street families an alliance because Sweet and CJ were gone, forever severing their ties. And 2, there was no more Grove Street families to be allied to in the first place. The Aztecas were not allied to all family sets, only Grove Street with CJ and Sweet. So this can explain why there's no love lost between the Aztecas and families in 2013. And 3, we can assume that the Aztecas we helped in San Andreas were not the same Aztecas we see in Grand Theft Auto V. The apartment complexes you fight the Vagos in San Andreas was the former territory of the Aztecas. This same apartment complex can be found behind Grove Street in Grand Theft Auto V, once again occupied by the Vagos. This means that 8 to 10 years after the events of San Andreas, the Vagos attacked the Aztecas again, and this time there was no Sweet or CJ to help protect them. We can also assume that around the same time, 8 years after San Andreas, is when the Ballas attacked Grove Street and took it over again. Overall, it seems that nearly everything from 1992 had either been dissolved or taken back after CJ stepped down and Sweet mysteriously quote-unquote disappeared. I see a ton of YouTube videos discussing this topic while trying to tiptoe around the canonicity of the 3D and HD universes, but to me it isn't outside the realm of possibility that the reason the sets aren't named the same in Grand Theft Auto V is because they were put under new management or were just created from another group of people. You've got to remember also that the Grove Street families were once orange. This is obviously a decision that Rockstar stepped away from, making the families rep green instead, but apparently there is a canon explanation for the color change, and it's because the families first started out, they repped orange until Sweet and CJ made their own set, similar to what Lamar and Franklin did, who decided to wear green instead. Over time, the old set was dissolved, and the Grove Street families who wore green took over as the most powerful family set, and so other sets followed. I don't really understand why so many commentators on this topic seem almost scared to consider that something similar could have happened again between 1992 and 2013. Another significant indicator is the fact that the Aztecas are pushing dope. In 1992, CJ and Caesar both had a mutual hatred for dope pushing. In fact, it's one of the major reasons Caesar hated the Vagos besides the fact that they took his former territory over. Some may say that Ortega just ran a separate set from what we know in San Andreas, because after all, they can be found in two entirely separate locations, Northern Rancho and Blaine County. However, the wiki states that the Aztecas are a small street gang, which can imply that they have no other sets, but just one. Apparently their headquarters are in Blaine County, and that can explain why there's two groups on opposite ends of the map. Back to my point about dope pushing. With Ballas, Families, Vagos, and Aztecas now all being involved in dope pushing, it's genuinely no wonder there are hardly any alliances because of the fact that they're all in competition with one another. What Stretch did in Grand Theft Auto V is literally no different from what Ryder and Big Smoke did in the original San Andreas game. It was new age pushing versus the old mindset of keeping drugs off the street, and unfortunately for Sweet and CJ, drug pushing made way more money. So, just like Ryder, Stretch did deals with the Ballas. If Lamar and Franklin still stayed by the old principles of the Families, they wouldn't have even done Stretch's deals in the first place, which means they've definitely done it before and weren't all that opposed to it. Anyways, that's my theory and what I personally think about gangs of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas and 5. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate if you consider giving a like on it as it helps the channel out, and I'll see you guys in the next one.